Hello, this is the most confusing YouTube channel there is because I used to be about hardcore sim racing, then I became the Throttle model guy and now we are staring at Formula Legends. And if you look at the reviews, they are somewhat critical of the handling, but really it's really bad. I want to throw them under the bus, but not without explaining myself a little bit. And it's not just this Formula Legends game, I also played Super Retro GP, Art of Rally, Circuit Superstars and Gene Rally 2, and that one really hurt to play because it could have been so much better. So what's going on in the world of these old sort of retro type arcade games, and why do I dislike them? I'm just going to focus on the handling and why I feel it is illogical. But you may be thinking, Niels, you're a hardcore sim guy. This isn't a hardcore sim, it's supposed to be an arcade game. Yes, I fully understand that, and actually making an arcade game is probably more difficult than making a hardcore sim, because with hardcore sim you have onboard videos to compare against, maybe you get some telemetry from the real race cars, at least you strive towards something that you know what it is. With an arcade game, realism sort of goes out of the window. How do you make it fun, engaging, challenging and yet easy to pick up? So yes, it is very difficult and probably more difficult to make an arcade racer than it is to make a hardcore sim. So throwing all these developers under the bus doesn't take anything away from that. They try really hard and they pull a lot of things off. But what does a racing game come down to, even if it's an arcade game? And I do not want realism, I want it to be logical, intuitive, easy to pick up, to look like a bit of a hero, but hard to master. And all these games somewhat fall short of that, and this one probably more than most. So what makes a game great? Well, I feel it is all about having control, and it doesn't matter if it's a hardcore simulator or an arcade game like this. You want to be in control of the vehicle, the object, the plane, the player, whatever it may be. And a hardcore sim is cool if you have a good sim like AMS1, gee, why would he mention that? Or Assetto Corsa, or LMU, or R-Factor 2, or Live for Speed, or Richard Burns Rally, and probably some others. When you get decent at the game and you've got a direct drive 4C back wheel, decent pedals, you can get a feeling for the car at the limit. And everything you do to that car will affect it very soon after, and you sort of look at what the screen's doing, what the image does, and the 4C back, and you try to make your input so that you're just about on the edge of grip, losing control a little bit and regaining it. And everything you do, lifting off, throttle, steering, changing gear, will affect what the car is doing almost instantly. And you're sort of constantly adjusting what you do to the car, and then half a second later it will be somewhere as the result of your inputs only a half a second ago. It's very sort of hyper and active and alert. And no lap is the same in a good sim, because you always have a little bit of a different slide, or your brake point is a bit different, or you carry too much brake or too little brake into the turn. So even though the track is the same and your laps are mostly the same, no lap is actually the same, because it's always a little different and you always react to what's happening. And I think that is what makes a game fun and challenging. Reacting and then seeing the consequences of that immediately and having control of the vehicle. And in a simulator that is realistic-ish and you use a wheel and pedals, and in an arcade game here with a controller, of course it is not going to be at the same level, but it somehow has to be engaging. You have to have good control over the vehicle, and it should be adjusted by all the things that you do and fairly quickly respond. So it becomes the same type of challenge as a hardcore sim, but completely different in its mechanics and really much more forgiving. Many of these arcade games, they sort of fall short because they make the inputs super sluggish. And I installed this joystick thingy, so you can see when I give it an input, it takes about 1 second for the car to slowly ramp up in that direction. And when I let go, it does stop fairly quickly, but when I start to steer, it ramps up really slowly. So what that means is, if there's a corner coming up, I have to preemptively start steering ahead of it, and there is very little control. Because if I steer a little bit, it feels even more delayed. and it still ramps up, so it's very hard to do a little bit of steering and then it might still ramp up. The feeling of steering control is very poor, and this is a trap that is easy to fall into with making a game accessible, that initially, if it's responsive, people might have the car overreacting, and one of the solutions is make it really sluggish, and then it is easier to drive, but it takes the direct control away. And it's a huge challenge, and I'm still not like literally angry at all these developers. It's very difficult to do, but somehow you have to come up with magic that gives you instant control, yet controllability. A big issue is it ramps up really slowly, but letting go is fast. So what if you time a corner a bit wrong? You have to let go of the steering and steer again. It's almost impossible. Oh, this is not quite flat out. Because if you let go of the steering for just a moment, it will take a long time to steer back because the ramp up is so slow. So you cannot adjust the steering mid-corner almost. You can adjust it a bit with letting go of the throttle, but the steering itself, since it is so sluggish, and since the analog control, since it is so sluggish, almost doesn't work. If you try to give it little inputs, it feels like you just have to wait even longer for there to be something happening. So you have to commit to steering and don't let go, and then you find there is a huge amount of grip, so you just go faster and faster, and then it becomes a matter of timing, and then play back that tape with all your inputs perfectly timed, because there is no adjustment needed almost. It's just that initial input has to be at the right time, and then you're good. And there's no challenge because you are not adjusting the car 12 times during a corner as you are in sim racing, or even when you're playing Doom, you're adjusting your aim a lot of the time. And here it's sort of play back your inputs, time them correctly, and that's it. See, there I took the corner too tight, so I let go of the steering and then steered again, but I didn't make it because stopping my steering input makes the car go wide so suddenly, and then steering again makes the turn in so sluggishly that you always never make the turn. And I just find timing exercises to be very boring. So here's a slight lift and timing. So I can time that a little bit better next time, but once I've committed, there's nothing I can do. The brakes are also really strange, and the throttle model is also not good. This isn't hugely important, but somehow to get going you need about a third of throttle. But once you're going, throttle is controllable. It's almost impossible to do a constant speed. And again, this is not about being a simulator, it's about being in control. If you want your car to do a constant speed, a good game allows you to do constant speed. This is almost impossible. What is also way worse than that is a lot of these games, and that makes a lot of sense, have somewhat of a lot of engine braking. So just letting go of the throttle slows the car down quite a bit. Now that can be quite useful, because even if you don't brake, it's sort of a two-stage braking system. Letting go of the throttle brakes pretty hard, and if you want to brake harder you actually use the brakes. But this would be way more controllable if it's sort of blended from acceleration into that engine braking gradually. It doesn't. We have acceleration or full engine braking. There is no gradualness to it. You would expect the first third of throttle, for example, to gradually remove the engine braking. But it doesn't. Here engine braking is a switch. Maybe you can make that work, but it would be far more logical if you had more control over the engine braking. Braking itself is also strange, that it seems to not slow you down. There's insane grip in the corners and I'm gonna brake. It took multiple seconds to slow down. I also locked the tires, and when you lock the tires, it's really, there is not a lot of grip left. So the braking feels sort of unexpectedly bad, whereas the cornering, you can carry an insane amount of speed if you actually time it well. So that is not logical in my mind, because you have this amazing cornering speed, And then the braking is so mediocre, you cannot really slow the thing down. To me that is a breach of logic. There is also no slip. The car seems to be going exactly where it is pointing. And for you to be in control and adjust the car multiple times during a corner, you sort of need a sliding mechanic, where the car is sliding, has sort of an arc it is moving, a sort of a curve that it is taking, and by steering left and right quickly, you adjust the path of the car, but it will still sort of take a corner, but you just adjust the corner a little bit. And when it's on rails like this with no slip, it's always the same: steer right to go right, steer left to go left. And the exciting part of racing cars, also an arcade race, should be, in my opinion, that you just control the path of the object by making adjustments all the time. And of course it has to be forgiving. And again, it is super difficult, probably more difficult than to make an actual simulator. But here it is a slipless car that I just give sort of binary steering input. Here I have to lift and steer. Oh, understeered wide. No control. I could let go of the throttle more, but it would lose a lot of time. And the next time all I need to do is learn when to enter that turn. If you get slip, there's just absolutely no control over it. And that's the key for an arcade game. If you have sort of a grip and drift mode, you should always be in control of both of them. And maybe the drifting is a little harder, but it should still be logical and rewarding and controllable. The whole point of an arcade game is to give you more control than you deserve. And then somehow still make it challenging for players that stick around and spend more hours on it. To still have them come back and find little finesses, like maybe that they can tighten the radius of the corner by lifting mid-corner a little bit, or dabbing the brake and then the throttle changes the line a little bit. Some advanced techniques to drive, that makes a lot of sense. But even the casual player should be in reasonable control of a gripping car or a sliding car, whatever the mechanic is. And here it is very clearly. Look at how slow the car full brake, it just stops braking. And here in first gear it is, see, this is sort of sliding, that almost looked nice, but it is uncontrollable. It's not a sim, and this state of the cars, and you can enable traction control and anti-lock brakes, but the point of an arcade game is to have control, and you don't. You also don't have control over the shifting. And that means in first gear it tends to spin out easily. So once you're in first gear, which you wouldn't be if it was a more realistic game and you had manual shifting, you could at least avoid first gear, for example. And this is a very fast track, so this is actually one of the more drivable tracks. What is a good game? The original Gene Rally. Very, very old. The car is always sliding a little bit and you control where it's heading, where it is going to be heading in about half a second, by making small adjustments, tapping the key left and right to change the radius of your arc. Lifting off makes it tighter. On the throttle may cause a bit of oversteer and may also make the turn wider. And by doing that and knowing in advance that you have good control over what the car will do, there's a corner coming up, you look at where you are on the track, you think, well, I think I'm going too fast, maybe I have to lift off and steer into the turn, and then there is this smooth sliding mechanic, and then you approach the inside of the turn, you might hit the wall, so you give it a bit of throttle or a bit of opposite lock, and I'm adjusting my inputs 5 times for that turn, and when I make the turn just right, it is really rewarding and fun to do. So Formula Legends then, alright, but Super Retro GP, one I tried recently as well, it's also just a timing exercise, almost exactly like this. It's really not fun. Art of Rally looks really cool, but I found the handling sort of, it slides a little bit, but it's an understeery, predictable, very sluggish type of input as well. And even Circuit Superstars, which is very cute and kind of well made, and I did enjoy it somewhat, ends up being another timing exercise that is just not fun to play. And the worst of them all is Gene Rally 2, because I just mentioned Gene Rally, which was, and still is, a truly exciting arcade game to me. Always adjusting the car, you have 4 ways you can adjust the car, and doing that in the right combinations, you're on top of the car is sliding, and then you set it up for the next turn. It's brilliant, and it's so well executed and so fun to play. Heart rate actually goes up a little bit playing a race in that. It's just amazing. So I was extremely disappointed to find that Gene Rally 2 handled like absolute pants. Complete crap. And I have not come back to it. Maybe they improved it since then, but if that's your second version of the game and it is so infinitely worse than the first, I'm just not confident that you have the skills or that you have the awareness of what made the original game so good. So again, I'm negative here, but all these games, they have their charm and passionate developers, I'm sure, but the handling is so important and they all fall short of what in my opinion should be a great arcade experience, making you look like a hero, but still you need to control the car in the moment. I didn't want to go to the gameplay side, but this game has track limits. And I find that such a bizarre choice for an arcade game. Track design is of huge importance to an arcade racer, because this is one of the easier tracks. If you go to the not Monaco version of Monaco in this game, it's almost undrivable because the tight corners are much harder than the faster corners. But the track design is of huge importance. So if you want the game to be easy to pick up and play, the tracks need to accommodate that. Maybe on the outside of the corner you have more banking, so your sort of naturally tendency is to stay on the track. The width of the track and the way the corners flow. Track design is essential to the gameplay. Whereas in a simulator you just make the track as realistic as possible and then you're done. Here in an arcade game, which is already difficult from a physics point of view, again, I have respect for these developers, but it's just incredibly difficult to pull off, and the track design is crucial to assist a good handling model and making the game fun. And having track limit warnings is sort of a simulation type thing. Track limits should be enforced by the track design. So there should be like concrete blocks or something, or other things that make you slower. So cutting the track is just unlikely to give you a benefit. But this is also a problem with Super Retro GP. If you go off track or you crash into something, it's very easy to come to a complete standstill. And the flow of an arcade game is, it should never stop, should it? You should always have like bounce off the wall and lose time, but not get so frustrated that you have to start from 0 miles an hour again. I have that strong feeling that none of these developers fully understand the importance. Maybe they do understand the importance, but they didn't pull off the handling model, and also they don't, well, I don't fully agree with how they decide to make the tracks, which are crucial to assisting the handling model. But it's just a shame, especially when reviewers are fairly positive, and I wonder if it's just because all the games have kind of been like this for such a long time, and some simulators are kind of like play your input tape back every lap rather than being in control of a car. And again, it's an arcade game, it shouldn't be realistic, but you still need that sense of thrill of being in control of an object, rather than giving an input that will apply in some way and then you really don't have a lot of control. So late 60s cars, and the braking in these is really bad. And the cornering grip seems equal to the other cars. And here you tend to overshoot a lot because that input comes on really sluggish. And then it's sort of still coming on when you don't want it to do that anymore. And it's just really hard to drive a smooth line. Plus, if you let go of the steering, as we've already mentioned, oh, and there we have that uncontrollable slip again. And this wall just stopped us instead of bouncing us off and keeping some momentum, which would be more friendly to an arcade racer. Letting go of the steering and then steering again is not really so sluggish. Not really an option, because that makes you go wide, so you have to commit and time it and just do it. It's really quite poor. What is the reason for it? Maybe, I do not know this, but maybe some of these games just use the existing physics options that are in Unreal and Unity. They have, as far as I know, a vehicle system in there. And that's probably fine for having like a vehicle in a first-person shooter that you can drive a bit, but it's the unique flavor, the fun of a racing game needs like a specifically developed physics engine, game engine, aimed for fun arcade driving. And maybe why these games fall short is they try to get the results with the existing physics options in Unreal and Unity and the other game engines, and they are just not offering them the flexibility of getting that nice arcade handling. I will say, and this is a bit of a statement and I could be wrong, I can tweak Automobilista 1 to be a more consistent to play, rewarding, fun gameplay arcade racer than this. And that's a hardcore simulator with a hardcore simulator physics engine, yet I am fairly sure I can tweak the numbers, that your control is more direct and that you need to adjust your inputs a few times per corner, and the end result is a more engaging game to play. Not harder. I do not want... why? I do not want simulation at all. I can make a better arcade racer from Automobilista 1 than Circuit Superstars, Retro, Super Retro GP and this Formula Legends. What we are seeing, I think, in gaming in general, the magic of a fun and an engaging game has nothing to do with your Unreal Engine 5 graphics or a 6-core processor. It is the magic of clever programmers who manage to come up with an engaging control system that engages the player, rewards him for practice, but doesn't punish him for being a bit of a noob. That is just incredibly difficult and sort of a rare skill, I think. And what these games do just doesn't come close to what I would say is a good arcade experience. You can also see, by the way, my best is 52 here, this is horrific, that the world best is 45. So that means there must be a way to almost go full throttle, and by just, I think, timing the steering perfectly, maybe lifting off the throttle every now and then, you can go an insane amount faster. And I'm very happy to admit I suck at these games, but the point of an arcade game is that even if you suck, you can still sort of drive it fairly well. And this 7-second gap between me and the best shows that there is something really unintuitive about the game. Anyway guys, that's just a bit of a rambly video that I wanted to make before bed. Alright, bye bye.